Thanks everyone for coming today. It's my pleasure to introduce Matt, one of the best founders in Seattle community. I personally very look up to him, and he has a long working history and also startup history. So, Matt, do you want to talk about your past experiences yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if I can live up to that intro, but I've been fortunate to live in Seattle for 26 years now, for most of my adult life, and be in an ecosystem that's had a lot of ups and downs in tech. And I didn't go to school for engineering at all. I actually went to be a lawyer. I got into UW Law. I dropped out of UW Law 2 days before I was meant to start, after realizing I didn't want to spend a couple $100,000 reading books and doing something that I probably wouldn't love. I joined a startup here in Seattle. I was employee number 4, I think. It was a horrible idea. It failed miserably, but I learned a lot. I had to do everything, including create their website. It was made in HTML. It had flashing red text at the top. It was like the ugliest thing you could imagine. But I learned that I enjoyed the coding side of that. So I taught myself how to code. It took maybe a year and a half to feel really good about it, but I learned Python. I learned C#. I learned a whole bunch of stuff. And that kind of pushed me through into the Seattle tech scene a little. I started at Microsoft working on their Bing process and program right when it started. So I think it was the 6 months after they announced Bing as the name. And I worked on their monetization algorithm. So how ads got shown, what ranking order, which is hundreds and thousands of millions of queries per second. And it was fascinating to dig into. And it set me down this path of data science, machine learning, a whole bunch of stuff. And I've had the fortune of working at Microsoft and Amazon and a couple other startups in the area up until about 3.5 years ago when I left corporate life and started my own company called Daydream, which the premise was your smartest personal assistant for shopping, right? So every vertical, everything you could think of that knew you, your style, your intent, your history, right, what you purchased in the past, and make great recommendations based off of context. And the example we used to give was, I'm going to a wedding in North Carolina. I need an outfit for the rehearsal dinner. Well, there's a whole bunch of things that are really hard for Google search to get right, or Nordstrom search, or anything online. You typically go into the store and talk to a salesperson and they would explain it. We wanted to unpack that and make it seamless, right? And so we trained a whole bunch of models on fashion-related stuff. We started with fashion, and we built a great team. We raised a bunch of money and have a product out in the world now. I'm not involved in it day to day any longer. I stepped away I'm not the most fashionable person, and fashion to me was narrow of an approach for commerce. I think there's a lot more you can do with understanding the full ecosystem. And so about 8 months ago, I started working with a gentleman named Sebastian Thrun, who founded Waymo and Udacity and a couple companies. And we have been working on a commerce stack, right? Larger than fashion, a whole bunch of things, but it's price-based. Dynamic pricing for shopping based off of user intent, history, value to both the brand and to us, the platform. And so that's been fascinating. And this is actually the first time I'm announcing this, but we're also starting something new. We'll have public announcement this week, but I'm joining an individual named Devo Harris, who founded Good Music with Kanye West and John Legend, and we're creating a new media company. So it's about how do you leverage AI to create movies, video games, any type of media application you can have, both on the creation side and the distribution side. So more to come out about that this week.
Wow, I feel so privileged among the first one to hear that. Let's give a round of applause to everything. Yeah, and before we start, do you also want to talk about the hiring? So for the new venture, or?
Yeah, we're actively for all of these ventures, we're actively looking for great talent, and it's quite hard. I imagine every founder in this room is understanding that as well. There's a lot of noise. So I'd love any tips and tricks y'all have. The biggest gaps that we're finding are 2 things. One, individuals who are applying for jobs who are not the individuals who show up, meaning there's a bunch of spam in the market, right? And that's really, really challenging to decipher what's real and what's not. And 2 is in this ever-changing space, there's something new every day, every week, every month. And finding individuals that have the depth to work at a startup, right, the fast pace of the startup, but also have the aptitude to learn on the fly is really challenging in this city specifically, right? Like we have a lot of mature, tenured tech people, but they don't either have the aptitude at a startup where you have to move fast and throw away the rule book and all of that. So that's something that we've been struggling with. But at the same time, there's so much great talent out there that we're moving really quick. We have the mentality of like, if you fit the parameters and you fit the culture, we're ready. Like, join us. And between the three, I think there's something like 30 open roles.
Wow.
And so excited to hear how others are doing hiring. I get it maybe later this afternoon.
Yeah, thanks for Matt for bringing the two issue up. So actually, I just talked to Matt. So I'm running a startup that's trying to solve those two problems. First with AI conversation. What can I say? Well, AI conversation simulation. So we simulate the conversation to verify you are a real human. Then we move on into scenario simulation to put you in real world test environment with a sandbox to see how you work with AI and all the latest tools. And we are actually integrating with Replit to see how people work with AI coding, and also Figma to see how you use the latest AI tools. So if you guys are thinking about how to make it scalable, how to track if it's human at scale and with a human touch, we are the job scenario simulation platform. And also me boss. Yeah, thanks for sponsoring, or I don't know if you guys are sponsoring, but you've been sponsoring all the foundation events. They are helping with sourcing. So yeah.
I'll give a little shout out at the end. So.
Yes. So enough of the ads and everything. Let's dive into the conversation. So Matt, recently I heard you are obsessed with memory and you just published a paper. Do you want to talk to us more about it?
So does anybody here know what biomemory is? Have you heard of that term before? I had never heard of this until well, that's not true. I had heard about it. I didn't quite understand it until about a year ago. But it's essentially the science of learning from nature and stealing how nature evolves and building things in life. So how the colors of a bird's wing are generated, what they do, like how they shield against predators. We take that and put it into pigment for paint on the wall, so it's safe for your eyes and things like that. And I heard this woman, Janine, who's labeled the godmother of biomimicry, at an event from a group called Jump Associates. They hold this event, and she came and talked, and it kind of blew my mind. She was talking about like molehills and how the government is studying them to learn about how they can tunnel better into places. And I just instantly thought, like, how do we have better memory? Like, our human brains are so evolved, right? Both in us and other animals over millennia. And yet, when I go to ChatGPT and ask it something, it forgets the same thing I told it 2 days ago, right? And so I spent the last almost year trying my best to be a neurophysicist and a science student and learn about the human brain and how we store memories. And I paralleled that into an LLM memory function. So how do we actually not have flat memory, right? The way that most AI systems work is you have memory in a flat situation and you associate it with other things. So smell of coffee, maybe you align it to Starbucks or all of the big chains or beans and what's the nearest edge around that. But that's not how our brains work, right? Our brains work by, like, if you smell a cup of coffee, it takes you back to a moment. It could be a happy moment, a sad moment. It could be a place. It could be a feeling. All of those things work by basically disseminating into neurons in your brain and the rest of your body. And then those trigger memories that are stitched together. So they're not stored in a single linear function. They're broken apart. And so what I did is I came up with a new graph structure that follows that brain pattern. And it was quite fun. I got really deep into it. But the research actually proved that it's A, much faster to recall memories, B, it's cheaper on storage, and B, the probability of getting the memory right is significantly higher. So I'm happy to share the research out. It got published last night. I wrote a bunch about it, but yeah, it's been a journey. And I'm still like barely scratching the surface of how the brain actually works. I don't think anybody truly knows. But if we think AI in its current height will be the next leap forward for us in tech, memory is the big blocker for us, right? Like, Anybody who's used any site that claims personalization knows it sucks, right? Anybody who has talked to ChatGPT or Claude understands that there's memory leak in that. Anybody who's used Lovable or any of these other sites know that when you're trying to build, you get into this death loop because it forgets that it fixed a bug 3 iterations ago. All of that's because this is stored linearly. And so my attempt is there's got to be a better way. It's all open source. Anybody can go use it. But it's been quite a fun journey to do this.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. I can't wait to try it out because I think every AI startup needs memory solutions, right? And you were talking about what you build is a sequence storage of events imitating the natural way and stored in that sequence so for better retrieval. And also you talk about it's actually cost effective in storage. How could that happen? I really want to hear.
Yeah, so the approach was to use a graph structure, which I think is pretty common to how others are doing. So for those that aren't as familiar, graph structures have nodes, which is like the event, and then edges coming off of it, which could be the item associated with it. And when you create a graph structure like that, the storage becomes considerably cheaper because you don't have to store everything in a single location, right? So relational databases, Postgres, others, document storage like Mongo, you're being charged for hot, warm and cold storage, and it's the recall mechanism. But in a graph, you can spread it horizontally, right? And you don't have to worry about how it's effectively being scanned. And so the approach was, how do you traverse across the whole graph rather than call into a single entity? You don't have to have labels. You don't have to have anything traditionally that you would store.
Yeah, I'm actually familiar with graph storage because I know a founder with Tiger Graph. They are also a Seattle startup as well. Have you collaborated with them on this at all?
No, I've used, I know Tiger Graph very well. I know Tiger Graph and Neo4j are like the big name in graph structure. This was done kind of just all open source out of building, but Tiger Graph's a great company.
And they just got acquired. But it's good to know. So also I want to talk about the best strategy if we use your memory, open source or any of the memory for startup founders. What do you think is the most important thing?
I think it depends on what you're trying to build, right? Like memory might not be important for half the audience in here on what they're trying to build in the general sense of memory, but if you're trying to do anything with an LLM, it's the most critical thing that you could possibly do, right? Part of it is it shrinks your context window. Like better memory shrinks your context window, so then that's reduction in cost and the number of tokens you're having to feed through. Plus, it's a latency player, so lower you have to remind your system what you're doing, the faster your system will be. So that's the first place I start. Is like, what are you trying to build? Does speed matter, and does retention of your clientele matter? Well, then memory is going to be probably one of the first places you should load. And there's a lot of players looking at memory. I mean, Google's spending a ton of time digging in. They just announced some really cool stuff. Microsoft is, and OpenAI and Claude and all those players are. But they're still thinking of it as the linear flow.
Yeah, so if the founder wants to start, is there any services that you recommend for them to log into?
For memory?
Yeah, for memory storage.
I think all of the general hyperscalers do a good job out of the box, to be honest, right? Like, it depends, again, what you're trying to do, but my personal assumption is Google is probably the best. Gemini is probably the best right now for memory and what they're doing. And so if you're looking for a plug on that, like, that's great. But all the hyperscalers do a really good job out of the box. There's just, you're going to pay for it.
Yeah, agree. Thanks for that. I'm going to actually move on to the second topic, the user experiences. Yeah, you probably look at a lot of AI applications. What are some projects that really impress you in their user experiences?
Interesting. UX. Maybe this is a cheap answer, but I think Cursor's UX experience is really good. I thought Windsurf's UX was probably better maybe a year ago or 8 months ago, but I think Cursor's UX experience is really good. If you go out of the IDE space, I've been impressed, surprisingly, with two companies that are killing it. I think one is Walmart on their AI approach. Their UX is really like taking a level up. both in search and their account structure and their site. So they're using all dynamic engagement now. It's really quite nice. The other is Home Depot. Their website, which is again, maybe go to their website, but they're doing quite a lot with UX and changing dynamics of how you think about the site showing up on what you're looking for. So more personalized experiences, more ability to ask questions of take a picture, what part do I need? Like all of those are really been baked in. I think that's the interesting thing about UX for this new AI world is you don't have the luxury of building a linear design that is predictable, meaning every button you push has an outcome. You have to think responsively in the sense of no matter what I do, the entire canvas has to shift. And that's hard, right? Like, if I say, I want to take a picture, you have to think about, okay, what's all the parameters of the input? How do I think about that? The user can tell me anything they want. And so those UX shifts are quite difficult. There's probably more who's done it worse than who's done it better, I could name.
Then who is doing worse? We haven't heard you mention Amazon.
Yeah. This is being recorded, so.
We will remove it.
I mean, Amazon does everything at scale, so like that's a factor you have to think about too. They get so much right, like so much right. I think what they've done with Rufus, who's been like their public view of the AI agent, has missed the mark. So it's because the utility of it isn't very helpful, right? As a consumer, if you're looking at it, it's a Q&A bot, right? Like, they've existed for, and like I give them credit for doing it on hundreds and thousands of petabytes of data that they probably have, but that's existed for 15 years, right? Like the evolution of what we're building has to shift out of this frame of a chat box and ask a question and get a response to make it feel natural and native and more engaged and answer the questions I'm not asking, which is like, if I go on Amazon and I look at Rufus and I say like, I want to buy a new coffee maker and I like this one, well, tell me everything about it, right? Okay, they pull in reviews, they pull in other stuff, but like, there's a lot of what's the return rate, right? What kind of beans does it use? Like, and I'm saying all this, I don't drink coffee, so I might be saying the wrong terminology, but that they haven't done that, and it blows my mind. Like they have the largest data set out of any consumer-facing company probably in the world, and they're slow, right? And maybe Apple's a little bigger and they're also very slow, but they've been disappointing what they put out. Bedrock is a good example. Like I think they were late to the party. I think it's a subpar model compared to the others, but I wish they would have focused more on UX, and I think maybe that's just my wish, because when you look at their site, they don't have to care about UX, and that's a challenge when you get to be that big. People are going to come no matter what, and their A/B tests are more about where to put the buy box on the page versus how do you make it 2027, right? Like 2 years ahead.
Yeah, so one thing we heard that you mentioned is about the chatbot as the interface. You think that thing is not the way what it is right now, and you think we are moving away from it?
Yeah, my hypothesis is that text as an input will be dead in the next 3 years, and like, sure, people will still use it, but I think it's if you look at like Google publishes some trend data of the number of individuals who are using voice in their search versus text input, it's declining rapidly. So I think in 3 years it's going to be a dead medium. And so if you are betting on a box that you input text into, even if it's just voice input into, it's going to be a hard thing to win on. And I don't know what the winning recipe is. I have a couple of thoughts that we're playing with, but I think if you're relying on text, you're going to miss the next wave of multimodal, right? Like both visual and audio are really where we're at. And so that's another challenge you have to layer on, right? Which is how do you parse all of that? How do you think about it? But I truly think text is going to be dead.
Wow, so this is very new to me, actually. So you're saying maybe we are moving away from text input into audio and maybe even video input for human-computer interaction.
Yeah. Yeah. Just talk about. I mean, like, think about what you've seen in every futuristic movie you've ever seen, right? It's somebody wearing glasses and they're looking out, and Meta's been trying it, and Apple's been trying it. That visual representation of your world has so much more context than a string of characters could ever give, so it's really rich and relevant. That's where we're headed. I think we're pretty close. And so, like, SEO is going to fundamentally change because rather than having a single, let's call it a bunch of meta tags or metadata on your page, now it's going to be visual. So I'm wearing meta glasses, I'm outside, it can see I'm at a location, and all of a sudden that infra layer that's sitting on top of the grid now becomes the SEO for whatever platform I'm on. That plus the voice aspects of peripheral audio is really important. So if I'm in a loud place and it picks up things, it can make an assumption to where I am if you don't have video on. Those are going to be the inputs. And so as you're building your business or starting a company or even working at a big company, I often tell my students this as well, like if you're building with text as the main input, you're already like a year behind. And like that's just my hypothesis. It could be very wrong, but I've seen the trends here. And so that goes back to the chat box of what's the UX of this. I think it was a nice wedge to get users and us as just humans used to talking to an artificial system. But that quickly is fading. People are like, okay, I've done this. Like it feels the same as any other chat box. And so if we really want to push this to the next level of what's the experience for consumers or for users or for enterprises, it's not a box on the page.
Then what about the whole UI experiences? If it's gonna just take whatever video audios, what will show the buttons? Do you think all the buttons will go away?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, like you still have to have predefined motions you want users to go through, right? Like you have to have a button you can click that can help you check out, maybe, or maybe you just say check out, it does it. But I don't know what that is. Like I haven't figured it out quite yet.
Where do you get your inspirations from? I think a lot of founders rely on sci-fi books right now.
So Cory Doctorow is a great author. If you've read, I highly recommend it. His stuff is awesome. I get my inspiration from 3 places. One, my kids. I'll ask them a question. So they're 3, 6, and 12. And I'll ask them a question, and they have no preconceived notion. They don't have their own iPad. They don't have phones. So like they haven't experienced UX fatigue yet. And so I'll ask them like, what would you do here? And some of the stuff they say is like so simple, and yet, oh my God, like how have I not thought about that? So that's one. And they keep it very literal, so that's nice. The second is a bunch of movies and books. And then the third is, so I teach on the side at the University of the East Coast, and I go to the art program there. And so there's a great book, and I'm blanking on the author, it's called Steal Like an Artist. And the whole premise is artists in their daily life look at everything around them for inspiration, and then they rip that off and create their own. So it's not as if they're stealing, they're just getting inspired. The book is awesome, highly recommend it. So I go to the art place on campus, the art building, excuse me, and look at what they're doing, and I try and get inspiration for that because their design is amazing. And that's everything from like different mediums, pottery to paintings to others. So that's helped.
Yeah, I think this answer is so helpful. I'm just going to summarize it. First, from kid. Secondly, from the sci-fi books and all the media. And third is from art and nature. So I want to say, actually, I think the first and third thing are actually together because kids got their inspirations from art and nature. And also, this is a very interesting trend that is the AI founders are so young right now. The average age is like 20, 25. So what do you think of this trend?
I love the fact that there's passionate people who want to build stuff and they're talented enough to do it. And I think the tooling that we have is helping them move faster. I think it's a bit dangerous as well because you don't know what you don't know, right? And I'm maybe one of the older people in the room. And it's easy for me to say that, but I can tell you that the folks that I've hired that are 18 to 21, who are some of the best cracked engineers in the world, struggle the most on putting things into production. And it's not because their code is bad. It's not because they're doing anything wrong. It's because they don't know when to slow down and when to speed up yet. They haven't learned those life lessons. And I think the founders who are coming in are learning that the hard way. And there's a bunch of examples, right, of people who grew too fast and scaled too fast and they can't keep it up. And that's a hard thing for no matter what your age is. But I think that's a really tough thing to ask somebody who's just hitting maturity of adulthood to come in and start, run, grow, and engineer a company. Now, would I bet on a really cracked engineer who's 18? Sure, and I have. But I think it takes a special talent of IQ and EQ, and that's hard, right? Especially if you're either skipping college or just coming out of it. You're still forming your opinion of the world.
Yeah, so I personally think a balance between experience and the young mindset is a good sweet spot. That's to say your company should have some young mind that is very brave. They don't need to learn anything. They know nothing. It's good to have them. But meanwhile, you need experienced folks to guide you and guardrail you on those are the things you shouldn't do. I already tried before.
Yeah,
right?
I love that. And that the proof in that is when you look at most great viral ad campaigns, it's the young intern who probably helped design it and it's that's what you need to say. And 100%, you have to have a diversity mix of skills, ages, everything. One, because again, learning fast is hard to do when you've been in a career for 10, 15 plus years. And that's an approach that we've had at all the companies and even back in Microsoft.
Yeah, I really want to echo that. So I was in SF last week and talked to a bunch of YC founders. They are all in 20s, and I feel like it's a little bit mind-blowing. Also, they are very stressful because they are a little bit too young. And the mature founders, we've been through the life, and we know we are not that stressful. And also, we tend to not to burn out because we know it's a long-term game.
I'd love to learn your tactics to not get stressed.
Well, yeah, I do personally feel very mind-blowing by talking to people 20 years old and already very advanced in their startup journey. But I also sense it's a different mentality in what they do because they are very, very all-in mindset. That's to say their life is zero balance between everything else. And I do find there is a tendency for them to burn out at a certain stage. But however, mature founders, we are not very into exponentially growing in the beginning because we have other duties, responsibilities of life. But if we persist long enough, we will grow very steadily. I do think those two things need to come together. I will have to say, I feel SF has the super young spirit, and in Seattle, I see more steady growth.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, SF is, you can feel the energy right there. I think Seattle's actually growing to be a much better and bigger tech scene, right? I think in the last even 2 to 3 years, there's more investing, there's more founders coming here. UW's been a big part of that, right? With students coming out of it. Allen Institute, AI2, what they're doing in the AI house is awesome. And so, and Yvonne is killing it over there. So, I think you're right. I agree with you on finding the balance. That's super important. And for the younger founders, the ones that I have met that have been really fascinating are the ones who started something in college, in their dorm room, and they lived it, they ate it, they breathed it, and they had an opportunity to jump out and build something. And all they knew was 24/7 because they were at school, and they don't know how to live outside of it. And that's where I got to the point of you don't know what you don't know. And there's this trend, maybe it'll be a trend, it's starting to kind of propagate a little where these hot young talent are looking for more mature, in-career folks, whatever it may be, to come be a CEO. So they want to build a company, and then they want, you'd see that later stages, typically. It's being pulled forward quite a lot now. And I've seen more VCs pushing that, actually, which is help mentor, but come in and run this, which, typically was an
Yeah, I personally do see that as well. I think the young spirit or the crazy ideas might be helpful in 0 to 1, but from 1 to 10, you do need some work experience and the real life experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so the last part I want to talk about is the authentication. Yeah, I know you are expert in that as well, and I saw we authenticate them.
Yeah, this is a tricky one. So it's kind of the Wild West right now, right? Like agents are going out and talking to other agents, and MCP came out as a protocol, which is awesome. And for most stuff, it's safe today, right? Like there's no real auth except one-to-one. So like if I want to have my Claude code set up connect to my linear MCP and then also my GitHub MCP so that it can talk to everything across. It's pretty seamless. Like it works fine. But we're quickly going to get to an inflection point where there's so many other servers you want to connect to or agents you're going to talk to. You have no clue who they are. And there's really no direct auth process for that yet. And so I think there's a combination of things that will happen. One, I think Arcade is doing a phenomenal job, Arcade.dev, who the team is building agents, but with auth as the middle layer. Like they're the first ones I've really seen building against this, and their whole premise is like crypto focus, like hashing and chain structure for agent collection kind of approach. I kind of butchered it there, but like you get the sense. And the second is, I think we're going to get to a place where the agent-to-agent piece isn't going to be where we are. I think for the auth process to happen, you're going to have to replicate an agent, and then you can directly own the authentication for it, rather than make a call out. What I mean by that is, if there's an agent that will help me send emails, right? Like, okay, I'm going to auth with my credentials, I'm going to give it permissions with whatever API. I think the future is actually being able to clone that agent and bring it into your ecosystem so you don't have to worry about the auth and it's much more secure. And then you could basically just clone it. So for now, I think players like Arcade are doing a good job where they're focusing on auth first using blockchain. And for the major players like the GitHubs and Claudes and all those, they do a decent job. They're using standard token auth, JWT kind of style. But I think we're pretty close to this place where there's going to be nefarious actors that are building agents out there that are going to get access to your stuff, your systems, your client systems, and there's not a protocol in place to solve for that. And so that's an area where I've been cautious on how many agents you actually use that you're not creating in-house, and even those where they're making calls out to.
Yeah, and also it comes with the authentication as a responsibility. If you let the agent use your own auth, then whatever this agent does, people kind of trace back to you.
Correct.
So how do we distinguish you versus your agent?
Yeah. That's the also interesting piece about this is that hashing structure that I kind of talked about. That creates a unmistakable identifier, right? So you can't alter that. The way it's done today, you can adjust a token. Somebody could spoof it and hack it, and your agent could go do something bad, and you get the blame. I think this focus, again, I'll go back to Arcade, who's doing a great job. I think their approach is really interesting, where they act as kind of a middle pillar, and nobody can adjust or clone your agent without permission. And I think that's really where you get into trouble.
So that way we can tell it's from you directly or your agent.
Correct, yeah.
And it's all traceable.
Yes.
So it could be, you couldn't say, I said that bad word to you, it's not me, it's my agent.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
And again, like it's a new field of how do you think about the approach for auth and identity with agents. And that also goes to, if you have an agent on your site, let's use a real example of Nordstrom. I like to pick on them a little. If you have Nordstrom, and their clients or their customers are authenticating with their email and password, where they can log into their account, where it's all of their history, their search history, their buying stuff. Nordstrom's building personalization logic on top of that on their website. Now, if you have an agent for that, do you use the email password or do you move to something different, right? And so this, how do companies think about authentication and identity is really shifting too, based off of, and I use agent loosely, whatever AI systems they're stacking on top. Because if I'm coming in from another website, you probably want to know where I'm coming from, and you want to know what I did there. And so if my identity is being spread across the internet, well, you should probably follow that. And you're not going to get it by rolling your own auth of email and password. So I think that goes to a lot of places as well. Like, how do you have your hash or your ID structure follow you to different places?
Yeah, I think it's especially important in the browser-based or the agents that we are using, the automated agents. They actually use our own Google authentication. Yeah. So the startup you mentioned, could they actually help with that?
Yeah, they're doing a lot where it's, you can use any of the prior auths, so Google auth, Amazon auth, Apple auth, whatever it is, and then build that into the flow of the agent structure so it is unit tracking. And that's kind of their big thing is like, start with auth and identity first, IAM management, and then build the agents on both sides.
Wow, this is very advanced topic for me, although I do have some technical background. Does this has anything to do with your current project?
I think it should, but it isn't yet. So maybe tonight I will go fix that. But no, the current one is about how do we think of media, so movies, shorts, clips, video games, in the new personalized world. So that's both the ability to create content with voice and the ability to watch, play, and engage in content and immerse yourself with voice. So if I wanted to say to the TV, like, hey, let's play a trivia game based off of Seattle history, it could instantly spin up that game, allow us all to either scan with a QR code to your phone, or we can use voice, and it could recognize who's in the room, and we can play a game together. Like, that type of engaged, immersive media hasn't really been built yet. Choose Your Own Adventure has always been, like, I used to love the Goosebumps books when I was a kid, and they were Choose Your Own Adventure, so you'd read and you'd pick which page you go to. Now I think we have to have it for content, right? Like, if I'm watching Netflix and my daughter comes up to me and is like, I want to watch a show about the universe in the style of Cocomelon, she should be able to. Like, why can't we do that? And so that's where we're building. That's the back end side. The front end side is, well, now you have a marketplace or a distribution network of all content created that could be plugged into any platform and any streaming service and any solution and instantly render it to what you want. So maybe you want to translate it from English to whatever, you could just say the words and it'll do it. And then the other piece is content creators struggle a lot with the editing aspect, right? So how do you take 7 hours of content and then slice it into the perfect still? Well, yeah, I can help with that, and it is already. Adobe's doing a great job. There's a bunch of startups, but maybe you can use your voice to be like, I love that scene, I hate that scene. It'll take it and parse it. And so that's pretty far along. The future of this will be you can talk to a video game and it'll create an entire gameplay for you on the fly, or you're playing something else and you could say, I don't like that character, I want myself. An example would be World Cup. I want to play, I'm not athletic to play soccer, but I want to play. So maybe I'm playing a FIFA game and I want to put myself in the game, I can say, render me in, and it'll do it for me.
Wow.
So that's our hope and focus, and we'll get it.
Yeah, it sounds to me the hyper-personalization in content creation.
Yes.
And is that a distribution channel, like a Steam platform that people can all develop on?
Yeah, exactly. So that's the second part was like, this should be a place where people can develop their own games and then put it out to the world to play, right? It should no longer be, you have to have a master's in physics to create the best video game. Well, just hop on and you can create it.
And also people can create their own maybe movies, contents like so it's somewhat comparable to YouTube and the Steam combination because you have multimodal support.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know yet, right? Like that's the fun part of this is the tech is there, the way you disseminate it and the platform you build it into is a lot to figure out.
And this is a company that you are hiring?
Yes, we are.
Okay, what kind of talents are you looking for?
Full stack AI engineers, front end designers, all the great typical stuff.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you, Matt, for everything. I think that's all for our fireside chat today. So, we can open the floor a little bit for short Q&A.
Yeah. Anyone who have questions? Yeah. For Matt or for Tian? Require. Oh.
I lost my voice a little bit, so forgive me. Actually, my question is a little extremely specific, and kind of taking your words a little literally, but it's kind of my industry. As I work in content creation, especially for kids media, I'm working on making educational content and really specific and hopefully more Schoolhouse Rock, where it's really ROI on your time. So as you said that you hope that and this is something a lot of people don't know. As you hoped your daughter would be able to watch CoComelon on the universe, one thing I know is that CoComelon, people have done a lot of studies on it, and they see it's actually like a hyper-stimulating TV show. It actually has super bad effects on kids. It actually probably shouldn't even be online, but they use it because it's so triggering. It actually gives withdrawal effects, and I actually never don't let I would never in my life let my daughter watch that show because it has such a horrible effect on your brain. So maybe you can look into that. But anyway, my point would be too is I see these huge, and again I'm building all this stuff with AI, and sometimes it throws in this crazy stuff. You're like, oh my god, that doesn't have the right meaning, and kids have no clue. So I think as all this is emerging, that's something I'm really trying to jump right in and help with, is kind of building these protective barriers for kids that they don't quite realize, whether it is this overstimulation of visuals or these hidden reverse messages or stuff like that. So what kind of what are you guys building into this, or are you just it'll work out?
Yeah, it's not it'll work out. First of all, thank you for the CoComelon tip. I did not know that. It will be more Bluey in our house and less CoComelon.
Well, that was
okay. No more TV.
Yeah, exactly. Build it out. We got to make replacements, honestly, because they've all been taken over by corporations.
Yeah.
They don't have the best incentives.
It's not we'll wait and see if it all works out. I think it's a slippery slope on protections you put in place because they're subjective, even if they're science-based. Right? And so our job right now is not to be the barrier. It's more to come up and hypothesize on how do you build a tech that could help with it. Once you get the distribution channel, I think it becomes a very important and heavy conversation to have of what levels do you put into place. It's kind of like what Google or Microsoft do with their browsers, right? They give you the ability to have strict mode all the way to open mode, and they let the user decide what level do you feel comfortable with. I could imagine there's a place in the future where that will be part of this. Is hey, let your kid create a show, but don't go overstimulating or something to that extent. Great question. And now I'm going to unplug every TV in my house.
Right, I know. Sorry.
Any other questions?
So we talked about young founders at the beginning of their journey with less experience. I have a question regarding founders with a bit more experience, especially coming from the tech. And I kind of want to ask, I'm sure if it's advice, or if you choose 3 things that you found from your experience in deep tech that you found very useful in your journey of becoming a founder or performing as a founder that you don't think you have knowledge.
Yeah, that's a great question. The first one is how to handle scale. You learn that in a big company and how to handle the pressure and plan for scale. As I've witnessed, younger founders, even younger employees, just don't know what to expect. So that's one. I had the opportunity. I was fortunate to work on systems that scaling to hundreds of millions, right, or hundreds of thousands in some of the products. So that's one thing that I took away really. The second is how to write. The ability to write documents and put conscious thoughts on paper and form an opinion is kind of being lost with the way AI is helping with writing, right? And I don't say that reductively, because I think it's important in helping create a lot, but the skill to write at Amazon was burned into me, for better or worse, and that has helped me on the ability to write contextualized, mature papers for investors and others, and I think that's a hard skill to get. Moving from even if you have a young founder coming out of university who's a great writer, that's a very specific form of writing that they've been practicing, right? Even if they've been writing research papers, that you learn how to write for business at an enterprise company, or it's becoming a habit now, I think, with a lot of individuals. But that's one thing that I took away. And I think the third, actually, I probably wouldn't have said it until today, but you mentioned the ability of balance. You have the luxury, and it's a position of privilege when you're in an enterprise company to take time off, and you know the company's not going to fall over. And I know I learned how to do that, and like how to actually somewhat unplug and trust that the situation would be handled when I step away. You don't know how to do that, right? If you've never been in an environment where you can step away. So those three, I mean, there's a whole bunch. I personally love my time at enterprise companies, and I think like I learned a lot, and you get to work on cool stuff. I think this time and moment and what we're able to build and the tech we have, like you can't move as fast as you want to at one of those. But those three, I think, are the big that I'd probably say I stepped away with and reflecting on.
So you've run a few companies. What's been the most rewarding part about running these companies, and like what's been your favorite part about them?
Great question. I think the most rewarding piece. I think the most rewarding piece is seeing instantaneously what you're building in market, right? Like you don't get that unless you're in this position, and that's like going from 0 to 0.1, right? Not 0 to 1, but 0 to 0.1. That's super rewarding because you have this thought, you can draw it on paper, but putting it into reality and then having alpha testers or beta testers use it, like that's so rewarding. You get this jolt of adrenaline. Like I love that, and seeing it happen over and over and over, and then growing those teams to feel that same thing and build kind of a culture around that. I think that's been one of the most rewarding. The second most rewarding thing is I've learned to trust myself more, and I think for me in particular, when you kind of work at an enterprise company and you have teams, you trust yourself, but there's always like they call them the hippo, the highest important paid person in the office, right? Like it's a saying. There's always somebody there that you're kind of like, okay, they've been doing this, I trust them. You're on an island in the middle of the ocean when you're a founder. Whichever direction you're going to pick is the way you're steering the company. Like that's a hard thing to do. I've learned to trust my gut more, and that's been pretty rewarding. And it's not always right, but it's a skill I think as a parent I'm leaning into, but also as a founder, like it doesn't come naturally, right? Like that's a hard thing to do. So that's been pretty rewarding.
So you said younger founders have a pattern you notice where maybe they might not be as good at pushing code to production. That makes sense. I'm curious on the more like the commercial side, what pattern you notice in younger founders.
Yeah, let me caveat. Like, I don't think they have a problem shipping to production. I think they struggle with getting things into production that are production ready. So like very different thing. Anybody can ship into production. But production ready is a whole different beast, especially with the way live coding goes, right? Like your backend probably doesn't exist in a lot of cases. So so on the commercial side, can you like give me a little more context on what do you mean by commercial and what do you mean by?
That's like on sales and marketing.
Yeah.
Sales.
I think I don't know if there's a difference, I would say, between engineers and, rev ops and sales ops in kind of that pattern that I mentioned. It's the same thing. Like one, you're not pushing production, but when you're fresh and hungry and maybe you're the best sales person ever in the world, you still don't have the lived experiences of how to deal with the curveballs. Like you can watch every movie, read every book, learned all the playbooks, but there's this hunger for closing that exists, and that's on the rev ops side, the sales ops, and the marketing ops side, closing whatever you're doing for speed when you're younger, or at least what I've witnessed, versus closing it at speed with accuracy. And I think that those come with like living in the trench of that environment. And so I have seen personally, so I worked at a company called Auth0, got acquired by Okta. And during that time, like it was a very heavy RevOps focus. The guy who ran RevOps' name was Dave, phenomenal guy. But the team was on the younger side, and like it was all hands on deck, grind, close every deal, no matter what. And some of the mature folks, and mature I mean older, trying to be PC, like those folks had a different approach, which was like, we're gonna be strategic about the way that we tackle this, not just like bombard the client with whatever and call 100 people instead of 1,000. And it's just a different strategy, and I think there's longevity in one and burnout in another. And I think that's kind of the pattern that I've seen of that. Now, I will say the best RevOps growth kind of club them together person that I've ever met was 19 and crushed it at everything, and like just blew my mind, like was wise in everything that he touched, was just phenomenal. Those are rare, right? Like, so age can be a benefiting factor there, but the patterns are, again, this desire to prove yourself versus this desire, I've already proved myself, or I kind of know my lane to stay in and how I'm going to operate. And again, longevity is the game, in my opinion.
Yeah, so you talked about that the memory itself, if you build anything with LLM, that is the biggest barrier. As you mentioned that later on it's gonna from like text input into visuals, into videos, things like that, will take up more memories. So by that, what kind of tools you would recommend nowadays to use? Also, do you think how far in the future that is gonna lean down on the memory side that it can be used more by the AI startups?
Yeah, I think that the place that I would focus now, and that I am focusing now, is on your embeddings, right? How you structure them. Most embedding processes are, you take all of your information, concatenate it into one embedding, and you lose fidelity on that. So like everything about me gets strung into some numerical order and then can be deciphered who I am. You lose the fidelity of that. And I think the approach I took in memory was you start to embed every piece of information that you want, and it's called multi-threaded embedding. There's only 2 real vector databases that can do that, so I would say you look at one of those and think about how do you compile the information you know, and then you focus on how do you retain that for the memory. Because that's the big thing. It's like memory systems can be the best in the world, but if the input you're giving into it is not junk, but like not optimized, memory is not going to be great. And if you're stringing every kind of information you have into one lump value, one embedding, it's really hard to process a memory out of that. And so that multi-factor, multi-threaded hybrid embedding is kind of the place I would look. And as far as like timeline, I mean, I think it's critical right now, honestly. And it's only because if you look at any of the numbers being published, OpenAI does a good job about publishing numbers. They might be wrong numbers, but they publish them. The amount of data that they're compiling every day and storing is growing astronomically. Like, it's off the radar, and I don't know how they're going to continue that. So if you factor that in, like more information being stored, more information you have to recall, if you put yourself in 12 months from now, it's a lot of catch-up, right? And that's for them, right? Starting a business is the same kind of way. Like, the more information you're collecting, the more you have to then retroactively fit into a memory system function. It just gets harder and harder. So I personally think it's critical. So I would say it's now.
Yeah, one last question, I think.
Thank you, and I think it's really good. And also, I like to ask a question about so you said you want to have the startup for the content, the media, or video. And my question is about, I know from the LM, we're using the training is all the text language. It's from our common knowledge from human. But from the video, actually, all the image, they do have copyright sometimes. For example, they have movie scene, they have music, they have even the pattern, even the logo. How do we control if we're using this training material to train data and how to?
Yeah, for those who didn't quite hear, it was like, how do you think about using copyrighted material or material that has a trademark on it in training? And I think that is a big question that a lot of people are thinking about on like at both the music and art and text level. For me, I'm going to let them solve it. They're much smarter lawyers. I didn't go to law school, right? So that's them. For me, I think about it in this way: of like, personalized content should be unique. And if you want to pull in some type of copyrighted material, you have to have a relationship with that to do it. And so we will actively block anything from being generated that we can, within our trademark understanding or copyright understanding, we'll block that, right? And so I can't say, I want to create that Coco Melon video without having a relationship with Netflix or whomever at Coco Melon to create that. I think there's like an ethical view on that, and then there's a legality view on that. And for me, the ethical view is, I think the open internet is free for training, right? Like if it's out on the web, I think it should be leveraged for training in some capacity. Now with the compensation, I don't know, it gets muddy. But the piece that I struggle with today and how to actually build this is when it's a very clear violation. So like the Coco Melon, or maybe it's like, I want to create a video about the movie The Sandlot, or maybe Spider-Man, right? And I want to pull it. That we will not allow for unless we have those rights, which is why I mentioned Netflix a bunch and other providers. Like you create those bridges with them and you get all the copyrighted material. Or it's a player like Nike and you get the rights to all of their players, they have their athletes and stuff like that. I do think that there will be a creator currency probably in like, I don't know, it's probably far away, like 5 years, but there will be some factorial way to give credit and get compensation for material that you have a trademark, a copyright, a patent, whatever it is for others to use. And I think it will be built on blockchain. I don't know what it's going to look like, but probably like 5 years because it's really hard. It's really, really complicated.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you are actually on blockchain. I personally want to echo that. Yeah, I do think it's gonna coming up in the next 3 years or more. So, yeah, we got so many startup ideas from your talk. So, really want to thank you again for everything, and also, yeah.